Hello, my name is Jerome Robbins. I'm the Assistant Director in the Texas Tech University's Center for Transformative Undergraduate Experiences, and I also direct the True Scholars Program. The True Scholars Program supports first-year and current TTU students through the entire continuum of undergraduate research and creative activities during their time at TTU. From providing research skills training, community building, and academic life coaching during your first year, group-based research opportunities your second year, and financial support for working one-on-one with a faculty member in years 3 and beyond, the program is there the whole way. In addition to directing the True Scholars Program, I have the pleasure of leading one of our group-based research projects, the Lubbock Arts and Intersections Research Group, or LAIR. LAIR creates space for students to research topics that align with their interest and field of study. In turn, that research informs and fuels some type of artistic output related to Lubbock or Texas Tech. Participants are encouraged to incorporate topics, methods, and thought processes relevant to their discipline into the exploration of associated areas of research. The project has implications spanning visual and performing arts, psychology, history, accessibility concerns, politics, and more. Our current artistic output is developing tours of the Lubbock City Cemetery to serve as a supplemental education resource for the K-12 school environment.
The rural cemetery movement began in the mid-19th century due to both unsanitary and overcrowded conditions in existing graveyards and a reappreciation of nature. Cemeteries were our first parks and art galleries. At the time, the number of museums in the whole of the US could be counted on one hand. The number of parks was only 2- or 3-fold greater. Socials would be held in cemeteries. Picnics would be held there. Dates would even stroll through them. These are cultural landscapes which both memorialize our loved ones and our local history. But as the US grew and more parks and museums emerged, cemeteries fell out of favor. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, there was a renewed interest in topics of the macabre. This so-called thanatourism, or dark tourism, reawakened an interest in cemeteries and burial sites. But most of the attention was placed to larger, more sensationalized locations like the catacombs of Paris. Today, we're in a less famous, but no less important burial site. The Lubbock City Cemetery was founded in 1892 and was originally 4 separate burial sites based on creed, race, religion, and socioeconomic status.
Studies show that place-based education, or students learning in their environment, increases teacher efficacy, but it also improves student learning outcomes. For the City of Lubbock Cemetery Tour, we decided to combine the TEKS, which is the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, using Texas history as the learning curve, which is focused on history and geography, and create a supplemental learning experience for the students of Lubbock. The tour includes primary and secondary learning outcomes. The primary outcomes focusing on the TEKS itself, being history and geography, while the secondary learning outcomes focus on people who you may or may not know that are interred in the Lubbock City Cemetery that made a significant impact to the Lubbock community and the communities around it. We have an opportunity to explore history in our backyard while simultaneously restoring duality back into the cemetery.
Pandemics are disruptive to society, as we have experienced through the recent COVID-19 pandemic. A tragic but well-known effect of that was the lives lost during this pandemic. A less well-understood effect was the social disruption that may prolong grieving for the survivors mourning their lost loved ones. We began by surveying funeral homes across Texas for the enactment of social distancing guidelines that may have disrupted grieving. We hypothesized that a relationship might exist between a community's religiousness and their adherence to those guidelines if they altered mourning practices. An analysis of those factors failed to detect any significant difference in average religiousness between those communities. We conducted an interview with Helen Washington, supervisor of the Lubbock City Cemetery. She had observed a greater frequency of grieving after pandemic restrictions were relaxed, which supports our hypothesis that social distancing guidelines prolonged grieving. This research starts an important conversation about how COVID-19 may have prolonged grieving, and it draws attention to identifying those communities who may have been most affected, thus in greater need of enhanced social services.
With me, we wanted to see, can landscapes be racist? The Lubbock City Cemetery officially integrated in 1964, however, many burial practices regarding minority internments went widely unchanged. So how did systemic racism affect this cemetery? We conducted mainly archival research, and some key players were the primary sources we found at the Southwest Collections Special Collections Library at Texas Tech. They contained the physical burial records given to the collection from the cemetery and contained both pre- and post-integration burials. Now, by examining this cultural landscape, we were able to infer that this community was indeed racist and may continue to be racist in many of its institutions that were formed pre-integration. This is incredibly important because our municipal institutions shape a community's legacy, and they have a responsibility to all of their people, regardless of color, to help create a legacy that Lubbock citizens, both living and dead, would be proud of.
So the students you've just seen have really conducted some truly innovative research, but there's much more to do and some real opportunities. And you don't need to be bound by your major either, because death studies are inherently interdisciplinary. You would gain foundational research skills transferable to any discipline. You would also be unique. There's not a lot of people out there conducting death scholarship, and there's not a lot of programs that allow for it. So an undergraduate that was able to complete a project in this would certainly stand out, both in the experiences they gained and in what they were able to produce for their resume.
I've really grown to appreciate this cemetery, and I would like to see the work continued. If I wasn't graduating and could continue on with my research, I would present my findings to educators and incorporate their suggestions to form a fully functioning cemetery tour. I've gotten so comfortable here, and I never expected that to happen. With this project being educational and my mother being an educator, I knew that it was imperative to breach beyond my comfort levels and create a project that the educational system could benefit from.
I would like to further examine the number of people affected by death care in West Texas due to the lack of data on this in North America. When examining community-wide healthcare, statistics may only tell you part of the story. However, when listening to the narratives of a community, this may give you much more detail and be of greater importance. Increasing access to these services could help empower communities to know when help is needed. As an aspiring future healthcare provider, this project has allowed me to see the need for increased social services such as mental health care resources. This would allow for community members to be more empowered to know when help is needed.
My advice for future directions in this research would be implementation. Restoration and beautification efforts have been successful among many other cemeteries, and we believe it would greatly benefit the Lubbock City Cemetery. In addition to that, it would also help restore the dignity back to the dead. On a more personal note, my future plans involve attending law school and hopefully pursuing civil and human rights law. Now, in light of this, I'm very grateful that LAIR allowed me the agency and the creative freedom to be able to find a facet of cemetery research that really lent itself towards my interest and future career aspirations. I'm also a very hands-on learner, and so being able to be outside of the classroom and learn sociocultural research skills through application and practice on a weekly basis, that was far more beneficial to me as a scholar and holistically as a person. So for that, I'm very grateful for my time here in LAIR.
So if undergraduate research and contributing projects like Lubbock Arts and Intersections research interests you, then the True Scholars Program is a wonderful place to start. Please visit true.ttu.edu/scholars for more information.